Yes, this is Gabe back at you with another video regarding Highlander the card game 2nd edition. I want to thank Wildfire 393 on the forums of the Highlander Pro Board for bringing this up. This is a good category to cover. He's a new player in the DC area, and I wish him the best. Just wanted to cover this topic. I know it can be pretty daunting, especially in 2nd edition with all the pregame cards that are out there. I do have to thank the company. They've done an excellent job of providing a mass array of pregame cards, which were not available in 1st edition. Wildfire 393, if you are playing or tinkering around still with 1st edition, you'll still find this useful, although I'm going to focus most on 2nd edition because that's what our group has mainly moved on to. Although I still have a gigantic box of 1st edition, we don't really play with that much around here. So as far as pregame cards, basically, of course you want to start with your persona. Your persona card is going to dictate your character's abilities, and the gems are going to tell you how you can construct your deck, so that's very crucial, obviously. I'm still begging the company to make a generic immortal persona, but that's neither here nor there. So secondly, as you stated, Wildfire 393 on the Pro Board, there's this card, the +1 ability card. It also, different from 1st edition, they combine the +1 ability card and your master cards cannot be countered or removed from the game by your opponent. That's all in one card now in 2nd edition, so I definitely like that aspect. A lot of people play with it because that one ability could end up being what saves your skin and allows you to live long enough to win the match. So that in and of itself, along with the master ability to not be countered, is kind of huge. So that in mind, usually most players will play with those. I remember at Gen Con, I would probably say 90% of the people played with both of those. Obviously, Persona, yes, but the +1 as well. So that's 2 of your 6 pregame slots. And that basically covers the first 2/3. Next is the weapon of choice cards, which another thing I love about 2nd edition, there's a whole mess of weapon of choice cards with lots of different upsides and downsides to them. So every weapon of choice has a special ability that it gives you, but also has a downside to it, which can affect how your deck plays. You do also have the option of playing without a weapon of choice. You can just play your persona and the +1 ability card, or if you don't have the +1 ability card, then great, you have 5 pregame slots that you can use. But a lot of people will tend to use weapon of choice because that gives you access to the sub-cards that belong to those weapons as well, which can be attacks, defenses, special cards that can give you nifty little bonuses too. So most people I've seen do play with weapon of choice, and it's kind of fun to mix and match. As Prowler was saying on the Pro Board, it is fun to mix and match and find out which weapons work better with certain people, so that's definitely a fun thing. But basically, it comes down to your strategy. You don't want to box yourself in and say, hey, I have to have this. I have played in tournaments where I don't play with weapon of choice because I just needed to find room in my pregame, and even though there's a nice upside to weapons, I needed to not have a downside as well. So it kind of comes down to your strategy and what you're trying to do. But I would say the biggest thing to consider in your pre-games is because in 2nd edition you have the gems restricting how you can build your deck and how many of each card you can have in your deck. A lot of people tend to rely on cards that allow you to alter your deck construction. Crystals, along with the Methuselah Stone, this is a great card if you can get a hold of one. This basically takes any crystal card that you have and it quadruples it, basically. Another 3 additional times you can substitute a non-special attack for a basic attack that's required, or a defense for a required basic block. So this pretty much just multiplies your crystals. This does take up a pregame slot though, but it's nice because it multiplies your crystals in case you don't have them all. These two are also nice. This American allows you to substitute up to 2 of your persona-specific attacks that are unreserved and have no printed restriction number in place of a required basic attack. You may have up to 3 copies of this card in your pregame. These copies together count as 1 towards your pregame limit. That's a nice card to have, helps you during deck construction. Darius, those of you who played First Edition remember this one. This is the one that increases the restriction number on any given card of yours by 1. So if you have a nice little shooting blade for Slan Quince that's restricted to 1, you can play one of these in your pregame. You can now have 2 of them in your deck. So, nice card. But that's basically the first category that a lot of the pregame cards fall into for me is deck construction. Basically anything that helps you alter what you have in your deck or helps you make it legal for tournament play, that's going to fall under that category. Second category, the fun stuff. Quickening cards. Everybody loves these and knows these, whether you're in First Edition or Second Edition. These basically give you nifty immortal persona powers. I do like in Second Edition how there's some quickenings that are not so powerful, but there's a vast array of them. So it makes it easier for people and less risky, I guess, because if you have some not so powerful quickenings, you play with it in a tournament, you lose it, oh well, it's not a huge deal. It wasn't that huge anyway. And that's the second category of pregame cards is quickenings. Those are always nice, but yes, if you play with them in a sanctioned tournament and somebody takes your head, they get your quickening card and they get to keep it. So that's the trade-off. But they do give you some nice abilities. What I tend to do is I only play with a quickening in a tournament if I have a double of it. So if I can afford to lose it and still have one in my collection, then I'll do that. So that's my personal advice. Meta, that's the final category. This covers pretty much anything that is discard for effect, like Wisdom of the Ancients. This is a nice one if you're playing with crystals, because this card will allow you to discard it from play in order to draw a card for every crystal you have in your pregame, up to 6. So in the middle of the game, you're choking on cards, you need something to help you bolster your hand. Dump this and you get a quick infusion of 6 cards that'll help you hopefully improve your situation. Anybody who played First Edition remembers these. These are the good old-fashioned rip cards where you basically tear it in half, and they made a lot of different versions of this now. So some might only counter an illusion, some might counter a special effect, some might nullify a card temporarily just for a turn. So this way there's a lot of different varieties of these that you can use for different purposes. One of my personal favorites, if you're headhunting, there can be only one. This is in every one of my tournament decks if possible. Basically it's a headshot. As long as you didn't play a special card, you'd remove this from the pregame and it makes any upper attack basically a headshot that can legally be made a headshot. Nice card, because I've had many a game where you're in overtime, you've taken your opponent down to 0, they've got no hand left, and you don't have a headshot in your hand. That's a nice one to have just in case. And this one is a nice card that they've come out with here, I think this last year or the year before. It basically does the same thing as the rip cards. You get rid of or cancel an effect as from a special card or an illusion as it's played, but instead of tearing it in half, you just remove it from the game. The downside is if your opponent removes this card from the game with another card effect, then you tear this card in half. But usually most people end up countering the card that was played to remove this, so it cancels out in the end. So that pretty much covers my examples of pregame cards. And all those cards that are discard for effect, I count those all as meta, because they give you a lot of different effects. There's some pregame cards, such as the Gatherings or Arms and Tactics. Those basically allow you to discard for different card effects. So it kind of just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But with all that in mind, my final advice, it basically comes down to 3 things in this order. Your strategy is crucial. If you are trying to accomplish something. Say, for example, you're trying to do a Bloodlust deck, and you need a card that makes it harder for your opponent to dodge or block consecutive attacks, then you might want to play with a Quickening card that will make it harder for them to do so. So I would say use your pregame to focus on trying to get your strategy off first. That's first and foremost. Because if you can get your strategy off before your opponent can, you're going to win. Secondly, my secondary objective with pregames, if I have slots open, is to compensate for things. Say, for example, my deck is huge and I was only able to squeeze in one, maybe no headshot cards, then I will pull in that card, there can be only one, to go ahead and have a headshot on the table and compensate for that downfall in my deck. So you can use your pregame to compensate for a lot of that stuff. Thirdly is meta. If you end up meeting those two criteria, you think your deck's good, and last but not least, you have one or two slots left in your pregame, use them for meta, especially this one. I can't stress that enough, how crucial it is to just have that ace up your sleeve to be able to counter something when it hits the table that could totally destroy your strategy in your deck. So that's my final advice. Focus on your strategy. Secondly, compensate for any downfalls in your deck. And lastly, use pregame cards for meta. It's just going to come with experience and play, and you'll slowly figure out which ones will work best in which situations. So there are a lot of pregames out there. The thread on the pro boards is definitely excellent with everything everybody's got contributed to it. Just wanted to put in my 2 cents and share this with everybody. If you've got any other topics or anything, feel free to share them with me here in the comments below. Otherwise, you all have a good night.